Thanks, Anne. So, hi everybody, and welcome. It feels like we're already close friends after that 5-minute conversation. But I wanted to thank you for joining this breakout room to hear from Gaby Lasky, who is a former member of Knesset in Israel for Meretz, which is the Social Democrat Party. It's now joined with Labour to form the Democrats. My name is Jacob. I'm the head of Meretz Canada, as we were just talking about, and I've been a board member with JSpace for about 18 months and a Naomi Chazan Fellow with the New Israel Fund for the last year. I've also went to Camp Shoria, where I grew up, and I'm very proud of that Canadian Jewish radical socialist, deeply caring upbringing. And you all heard from Gaby in the first panel, so I'm going to reintroduce her only briefly. Gaby is an Israeli human rights lawyer, peace activist, and former politician specializing in constitutional and criminal law. She's dedicated her career to defending civil liberties, democracy, and social justice, including co-founding a legal defense team that provides pro bono representation to the demonstrators advocating for Israeli democracy and the return of the hostages. A former member of Knesset for Meretz and Tel Aviv City Council member, Gaby has led efforts on gender equality, public housing, and sustainability. Previously, as the Secretary General of Peace Now, Gaby has received international recognition for her activism. Born in Mexico, she immigrated to Israel in 1982 and holds a Master's of Law from Northwestern and Tel Aviv University. So please join me in welcoming Gaby Lasky. Gaby, one thing that we hear all the time as Jewish progressives in Canada is that there is no left in Israel. Do you think that's an accurate way to describe the situation? And if it is, which we're worried it is, what's needed to revive the left?
Well, it's not accurate. There is left in Israel, and we can see the left now during these demonstrations that we're seeing the left even getting much more stronger. But someone said downstairs before that you have to be a Democrat in order to be against occupation, but you don't have to. If you're a Democrat, you don't have to be against occupation. And what's happening is that there are a lot of people in Israel that forgot that you cannot be a real democracy without fighting occupation as well. And what the right wing did in Israel was not only to fight or to fight against the Arab population, but also to transmit the idea that being a leftist is the bad thing. It's a pariah. And so a lot of people just didn't want to call themselves left because they thought that it's going to be bad for them, for work, for their families. And so a lot of people stopped recognizing themselves as leftists, although they hold the same values. And they didn't vote for left parties. That's, Meretz didn't pass a threshold in the last elections. So what's happening now, we can see in the last polls, since the government started, but even more so after October 24, 23, is that we see that we're getting stronger and stronger in the polls. Now we're stronger, sometimes even more than Lapid's Yesh Atid, center party, which means that that people are, when you are together, when you feel there's that you don't have to be afraid or ashamed of being a leftist, then it's easier. So we're getting stronger again, and I think that a lot of people that understand the fact that, again, what I said downstairs, that you have to be true to who you are and not think what are the right wings are going to say about you, then a lot of people are getting back to the left in that sense. So there is a left in Israel, and it's getting stronger, but still if I go back to the elections in '92, where Rabin was member of parliament, was prime minister, then the Labor Party had 42 seats and Meretz had 12. So that meant that we were almost a majority. It's not there, okay? We're not there, but it's not that like in this Knesset, there's only four members of Knesset from the Labor Party. That's the only left in the Knesset. But I think in the next Knesset, in the next elections, we're going to be hopefully, we're going to be any number from 10 to 20.
Let's hope it's 20. So you're talking about the groundswell and the rising of the left in Israel, and part of the way that that's been manifested is these protests. And you've been very supportive of the protests, starting with the Black Flag protest on Saturday nights 2 years ago, and the anti-judicial coup protests, then the protests after October 7th, and even now with this resurgence after the last week's attack on democracy, the firing of Ronan Bar. Can you speak a little bit to the sentiment in Israeli civil society and why so many Israelis are out in the street these days fighting against the government?
Well, I can tell you something that is it's very strange. Most of the people that are now in this in the movement are people that never went out in the streets, that have never demonstrated, that have never went out to a protest or anything. They're just like people that in a liberal democracy, one of the things, the values that you own is that live and let live, but so nobody really went out. People like me, I've been in the streets for years, but we were pretty alone for many years, with small demonstrations against occupation or the social rights, but it was never very big. And now people are just going out, regular people that haven't been in demonstrations, and the fact that the government every day is giving us a new reason to demonstrate is just making it stronger. In the moment the war started, a lot of people said it's not the moment to demonstrate. So a lot of people went back home and said, well, we had this catastrophe and so many people were murdered, and and so people went back. But after what we're seeing now, again, in the middle of the war, they're continuing the judicial coup. They're it's not that they're all the time telling us don't it's not a good time for politics but they are being politics. They're doing politics all the time. And so people, as Ron said downstairs, now people are mad because they're seeing that he's using the war in order to save himself. So you send our children to kill themselves, while on the other hand, you're not, for your coalition, you don't want to bring the Haredi to the army at the same time, and and you are changing the whole system during wartime. You're, if he says that the chief of the head of the Shin Bet has to go out because of what happened in the 7th of October, what about you? You're the first one that has to go out, and he doesn't want to make a national
A state commission of inquiry
because he doesn't want to. He has been the prime minister of Israel for so many years. He's the one that started giving money to Hamas through Qatar. With in Mizvadot. In suitcases, they were $30 million a month. In suitcases, they were going through, to Qatar. In our government, when we were in the change government, we stopped that, that crazy thing of just passing this money to Hamas. And through banks, the money was passed to, it was supposedly the money had to go for Gazans that didn't have food. So the money went straight from banks to the accounts of those Gazans for them to use the money directly. So it couldn't go to the Hamas. But Netanyahu, and there are people in Netanyahu's government that bluntly and openly say that the Hamas is a neches,
Hamas is
an asset. A liability. So there's what you have. Okay, when you have a government, you have a prime minister that say that Hamas is an asset, that it's okay to bring money, okay, and directly into the hands of Hamas, and instead of bringing it into the people. When you have this Qatar Gate thing, which means Qatar is an enemy state to Israel, and the closest aides of Netanyahu have been working for Qatar. We have Eli Feinstein, who was the spokesperson of the Prime Minister's office regarding army issues, and he was getting paid by Qatar, not directly, but through Jay Futlik's office, that he is openly representative of Qatar in the United States. Then, and he's saying that we are the ones that are that we are the Bukdim, that we are the traitors, that the left is a traitor. So people are mad. That's why people are going out. And as long as if we have masses of people, the second thing is that people go out if you think that what you're doing can make a difference. If we have these masses of people again, there is a possibility that we can change this something. In the first time that Netanyahu wanted to kick the Minister of Defense, it was a spontaneous demonstration that we went out. Hundreds of thousands of people went to the streets, and we were able to stop his removal from office. So that was one thing that we were able to do. Then he started with the coup legislation, and the first legislation that passed, we went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that it was illegal. So so it's important to know that our movement has possibilities to change and to do something. So that's why I guess that people are going out, and we do think that there's a possibility of change. And it is important because maybe we don't have another opportunity. Because if he's able to change the situation in a way where Arab parties will not be able to run for the Knesset, then and he changes the legislation in such a way that there will be no elections because there's a war. He will just continue the war without elections. So that is, we know we don't have a second chance. That's why we have to go out. Because this government, what they're doing is they're legitimizing the illegal, in every aspect. So it is like a now or never, and people finally have understood that.
I think that we're starting to understand the seriousness of the situation where the Israeli liberal democratic camp has its back against the cliff, and it can't keep walking backwards. It needs to make a stand. I wanted to ask you two quick questions following up on the protest movement. Do you think that it's time, with that being said, for the protesters to step up the level of civil disobedience? A general strike. We saw stoppages at Ben Gurion Airport a year ago. So that's the first question. Do you think it's time to up the ante? And the second question is if you could speak to the importance of seeing Yair Golan, the head of the Democrats, out with the protest movement, and to see these leaders of Israel's civil society camp and liberal democracy camp, former heads of the IDF, former heads of the Sinn Beit, out on the protest lines.
Former chief justices of the Supreme Court.
Them too.
Yeah.
The first question was about upping the ante of civil disobedience. Is it time for a general strike?
Okay. Definitely. I think that, as Ron said before, in the 5 most important issues that are now in Israel dealing, the government is alone. They're not representing the people. They're not even representing the electorate, the ones that voted for the Likud party. They're not representing them anymore. In some of the issues regarding stopping the war and bringing back the hostages, we have like a 70% range of people that want to bring. Regarding the Hakira, I'm sorry, I don't remember how you say it. The investigation,
Sure.
Inquiry Committee. it's about 85% of the Israeli population are in favor of an investigation inquiry. So they're like in this play, in this level on the outside of reality, that they are in a sphere that is not talking to the Israeli population, and so in that matter, it is of the utmost importance to start to and they're not listening to us anymore. Okay, 150,000 people went out yesterday for 5 days. There have been demonstrations, massive demonstrations, but there has to be more than that. And I think it's time for.
Do you think we can do something about this thing downstairs? Like, is there a speaker in the hallway we could get brought down? It's just through the floor. Can we lower the mics downstairs?
Okay.
Oh. Can people in here were able to understand what Gaby's saying? Maybe I could move one row closer into the front. Is that possible? Maybe scoot your row forward? Okay, if you can hear, you don't have to move. But if you can't hear, there's plenty of room. Hannah's a nice person. She's great to sit beside. Oh, we're good. We're good. We're good. No worries. Okay. It's fine. It's fully charged.
So I think it's about time to start having more elaborate matters of ways of protest, and so we can do that. And I have to say that it's very important to have, all these people in the movement. Of course, Yair Golan, as one of the leaders of the left in Israel, when for a long time we haven't had a strong leadership in the left, and to see that we have a leader that goes down to trenches with the demonstrators, and is not, in the office. It's, and it's part of the movement. Is very important. That's why I think personally that Yesh Atid are losing to to Democrats, because they're not there. They're not in the streets. We are getting violently struck by the police, and they're not there to defend us. Our people are being taken to the police, and they're not there in order to see how they are and how, if everything's okay, to try to release us. So we have Yair Golan, who's not a member of Knesset right now, but we have Naama Lazimi and Gilad Karim, which are there with the demonstrators. So it is a very, very important thing. And then we have like all these past Shin Bet heads. We have chief of police, different chiefs of police that are with us. We have the chief justices that are in these demonstrations. And when you have, all these people, for them to go out and openly talk against the government is very difficult, because they were so they were part of the government, they were part of the establishment, and so when their voices are heard, and some of them actually know Netanyahu pretty well. They worked with him because he has been in power for so many years. So they know him, and they know his faults, and they are also telling how he changed. And when did he change? The moment he was indicted.
Right.
When he was caught, because it doesn't mean that he wasn't corrupt before, but when he was caught for his corruption, okay, and he was indicted, then he decided that the courts are not good enough. He comes from the Likud party, that is Jabotinsky, and and Begin, and we're talking about the importance of the rule of law, the importance of the courts in Jerusalem. So that is the true revisionist ideology. The right-wing conservatives were very rule of law. They were even defending human rights. I can tell you, I sat with Benny Begin in the Knesset, the son of Begin, and he was telling me that his father, was against administrative detention, which is something I very much work against administrative detention. So here we have someone that is direct descendant of Begin, of the revisionist movement, and he left the Likud because he couldn't stand what Netanyahu was doing. And and and, and so that moment that he was indicted, he started, everyone that he appointed that went against him, and suddenly he became a leftist. He was a traitor. It was the chief of the Shin Bet, okay, not this one, El Sheikh, okay, and the judges and the the general attorney Mendelblit. I think it wasn't he was indicted. He worked with him in the office of the prime minister. But then when he indicted him, he's not trustworthy. He was, it is not true, and we have to bring them down. So now that they're coming out and standing with us in the demonstrations, it is very important. And it's not only, because they say they want to paint the demonstrations as political. Okay, of course, we want to topple the government and we want to win elections. But it's more than that. It's the essence of democracy. And in a democracy, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But at least you play by the rules of the game. And what Netanyahu is doing, he's changing the rules in a sense that only he will be able to win.
So let's talk about democracy for a second. One of the critiques that we get, and we hear a lot about the protest movement in Israel, is that the protests are for democracy amongst Jews, that they're for democracy within the Green Line, that they have turned a blind eye or willfully blind towards the occupation. Do you think it's fair to say that that's the general character of the protest movement? And if it is, or if it's not, what can we do in the diaspora to raise the salience of the issue of the occupation?
To raise the issue of the occupation, the first thing you have to do is to raise it, not speak about it. Okay, I think that the diaspora has a super important task to play in ending the occupation. And why? It's because as long as we have this government, and even I can tell you that in the next government, if we're able to win, it's not going to be a leftist government. There are just a few members of parliament, even in the next election that we win, that are in favor of ending the occupation. They're not the center right and the center parties are not in favor of that. And our partners in the next coalition will be Lieberman, who is really against that. It's the Gantz that some of the people there are very against that. In Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid, there are a few that maybe would say something but are not like activists regarding that. And Bennett, which also against ending the occupation. So we have to know that even if we win the next elections, it's not going to be a matter of, tomorrow we're going to end the occupation. So it is really important for the diaspora Jews to bring this not only as Jews, and that's why it's important next elections for the Congress. It's really important, but it's also important in order for you to act within your governments, because the only way that this will happen, that the occupation will end, it is hopefully, tomorrow there's a new election that the government will say, okay, let's start the peace process with the Palestinians and we will end it. But I don't see it happening that way. Only if there's international pressure that this will happen. And in some ways, Trump is he's talking about one day, that all the Gazans have to go and he will make a Riviera in Gaza, and Israelis take it seriously, and they just voted yesterday in order to make a new headquarters, governmental headquarters for this for the removal of Gazans from Gaza. Yeah, voluntarily, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and they're spending money on that, okay? Instead of, on working into creating and to fixing what's happening in the north and in the south after the war. So that's happening there. But Trump has interests with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia wants to make a deal of normalization, and that normalization Israel will have to consider the returning to the peace process regarding a two-state solution. So we have to see in that essence how you can involve your governments as well in going to the Saudi deal that will take into consideration the two-state solution. Saudi deal without that, what the Abraham Accords did was good for Israel in the sense that it's good to have peace processes with other Arab countries, but they didn't consider the Palestinian question. Okay? And we have to know that the Saudi initiative is still alive, and that the Arab League still votes in favor of it every year as soon as it came out. So we have to push for it to happen. And actually, this terrible situation that happened, this war, can in the end, since war is not, war do not end in itself. You need an agreement, okay? And so part of the agreement has to, if this government wants Hamas out of Gaza, then you need someone else to take its place. And of course, the nationalist Jewish party and Ben-Gurion's party, they want to conquer Gaza back, and they say that Israel can take the place there for some time and things like that, which is ludicrous. So we have to have a plan. What do we think is going to be the best possibility? And the only possibility there is to bring the PA into Gaza. But that means that we have to believe in the possibility of working with the PA. And I think that for a very long time, although we have problems with the PA, corruption and things like that as well, and we have to openly say it, but the PA worked with Israel in security issues in the West Bank and still working on it. Without the PA, the security issues in Israel would be worse. Terror would be coming from the West Bank into Israel if it not were for the work that we're doing with the PA in the West Bank. So we have to start talking that the PA has to take an important part of the rehabilitating Gaza Strip, and then to start talks for a two-state solution.
Good. Thank you for that. We're going to do questions at the end. We're going to have a couple of minutes. We can.
I was just going to ask.
Then that's okay. We're going to do questions at the end. I hate to cut you off like that, but if we start to interrupt with a question, everybody's going to
I'm
have a
okay with
question now.
interrupting me because I'm here for you.
But we've built in time for the end. So just remember the question. I believe you. So I'm happy you brought up Canada because we're heading into an election. The writ dropped today, April 28th. We're going to have a new election. And we all.
I couldn't sleep last night, so I saw that you have an election.
It's very exciting. Canadian politics has 5% of the drama.
It was so funny. I'm watching the Canadian news, and you have you have breaking news. Dental care policies is expanding. Canada is expanding dental care programs. I just took a picture of it and sent it to Israel. This is breaking news, really, really breaking news.
It's nice to live in interesting times.
Yeah.
So one of the things, it's a great place to be. One of the things that we've seen in the last couple of weeks and months in Canada after what happened in the U.S. and the pressure that the U.S. is putting on us as a country is progressives kind of reclaiming patriotism, progressives wrapping themselves in the flag. Speaking as a progressive in Israel who's never given up a sense of national pride, how do you suggest that we can take advantage of this moment where it's become acceptable again for people on the left who believe in equality and justice to not be nationalists, but to be patriots.
Well, it's very interesting because that's what's happened to us during the demonstrating movement. Like for so many years, we have given up all these symbols to the right wing. We didn't go out with a flag, to demonstrations, but now in the demonstrations against the legal coup, we had thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with the Israeli flag, appropriating back, what is ours, Israeliness, Jewishness, it is ours. It's not, those symbols. They mean what we want it to mean, which means, it means equality. It means democracy. It doesn't mean nationalism. That's, so it is very important. Patriotism is, we can be a left patriot. And what means to be a left patriot is that you love your country and you want your country to be independent and to be a democracy and sustainable and equal and fair and social and is giving social rights and is in for, so that is loving your country. Whoever thinks the opposite, that you have to take infringe rights and you have to take civil liberties and you have to give in to another country, then you're not loving your country. So then you are not the patriots. So you have to change the discourse in the sense that we that love our country, we are in favor of rights and equality and democracy. Whoever doesn't does not love their country. So it is a different discourse that we were taking for a long time, but I think it's real. Democrats, liberals, we're globalists, okay, in a sense, but we also have to be super local, okay, because it is more sustainable, and it's not okay to think about world rights and climate change and not think about what's the inequality that's happening in your towns and in your villages. And when you bring that discourse back to the local level, then it gets stronger, and it's not awkward.
Well, I think that when you and I got breakfast this morning, we talked about like a liberalism that cares about its neighbors as its next door neighbors, and the Tel Aviv City Council about social care and social welfare and women's rights and mobility and public transit and underserved neighborhoods. It's articulating a love of the place that you're from that matters to the people that are there. And so I think that one of the things that we hear in Canada about our relationship with Israel as progressive Jews is that if you love your friend and your friend has a gambling addiction, you have to tell them that they have a problem and be the person that can help them. Or if they're drinking too much, or if they're not being a good person to you. And it puts Canadian Jews sometimes into a bit of a paternalistic or fraternal relationship with Israel's Jewish community. Do you feel at all the same way about that? That the Israeli polity needs Canadian Jews to articulate some kind of moral clarity?
Yes. And I will tell you that you were talking about paternalism, but it's true that a parent will tell their child if they're doing something wrong. And it doesn't mean that they don't love them. The contrary is right.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very important. And also the clarity, the moral clarity you're talking about, it's easier to see it when you're outside. Okay, because you can see the whole picture. When you're inside, your everyday, fight for your struggle, just economical struggle, or with your kids or whatever, you're not seeing the whole picture. And so many things are happening that when we're fighting, for democracy, a lot of people forget regarding the occupation. And it's okay that that you tell us, hey, this is part of what's going on, and without dealing with the occupation, then there will not be real democracy. Now we have to say clearly that a lot of people now in Israel do not understand why democracy is important. So I don't know what is that, how that is in Canada, but in Israel, a lot of people do not understand anymore why democracy is important. And that is something that we have to start dealing again, with basic civil liberties, what it means to be a citizen, what means checks and balances, what it means not giving the government complete powers over your life, because we're back in that time, and at the same time we have to understand how fragile democracies are. We see in the United States it just took a couple of months in order really to raise a lot of democracy. And in the States, you have much more checks and balances than you have exactly that in Israel. In Israel, we don't have a constitution. The Knesset, the parliament, is not really an independent from the government. So we only have the Supreme Court, and now they're tackling the Supreme Court with legislation that probably will pass in a day or two. And so it's very striking, and we have to go back to basics.
Thank you. And I'm reading my last question now, and then we have the Q&A. So the final question, it's going to stay on the topic of diaspora, the diaspora, Jewish community and the diaspora involvement. We're, of course, at a pivotal moment in Israel-Palestine right now, and we're at a pivotal moment in the Canadian Jewish community as well. And what political path Canadian Jews support and what political path Israelis and Palestinians support, it matters a lot the choices we make in the next few days. So what can you say, and as an Israeli, as a Zionist, as a progressive, as somebody who believes in the future, what do you want from the Canadian Jewish community to do to be an allyship with you and with the movement right now?
First, I have to say that we in Israel have to be clear that everything that happens in Israel affects you as Jewish diaspora. It's not that we are separate, okay? And we have a minister of diaspora that is now aligning himself with the nationalistic right of Europe, with really Nazi parties, okay? Chickpea.
Yeah.
And so on the war and everything that happens, it affects you. We cannot say it doesn't affect you. So we're just two parts of the same
We're part of the same community.
So you're here and we're there, but we share the same fate in the sense that if we don't work together, then it's going to be bad for all of us. But if it's good, it can be good for all of us. So I think that the diaspora, you shouldn't be ashamed to hear your voice loud and clear, not only because of the moral ground that is important to show us, but because you're also affected of what happens there. And okay, you can't elect, you can't vote in Israel, but it doesn't mean that what happens there you don't have a right to say anything about it. So what is important is that that Jews around the world still believe that Israel has to be a democracy, that we have to end occupation, and that you support those people that are fighting for it. Okay, because I've been fighting for democracy. I'm a human rights lawyer in Israel for many years, and I've been alone for many years. These demonstrations are something new, and when we know that we're not alone, it just gives us a lot of strength to go on. And it has to be in different levels. One of the levels is through the organizations you're members of. Secondly, is through the Congress, the Zionist Congress, to really cast a vote, because this is the government of the Jewish people, and if in this government of the Jewish people there is a strong and loud voice for the left, then it's also very important. And third, it is important also to Israel depends a lot in economically in the diaspora. It doesn't mean that you can give your money to Israel in order for Israel to do with that money whatever they want. If you see the last budget the last budget is a completely secular, anti-left budget. They are giving money for Orthodox students. They're giving money for settlements, for organizations of settlers, for organizations that go inside our schools and tell us what to think and what to do. So, you know, it is fair enough that you say, that you can dictate what are the rules of you giving this money. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're not supporting Israel, but you're supporting democratic Israel. You're not supporting a populist Israel. And you're not supporting a dictatorship in Israel. Okay, because instead of that, then you would support the people that are fighting this dictatorship in Israel, because we still believe that Israel is important in itself. So and so these kind of meetings are super important, for us, and to be working together. It's important to make statements together, and it's important for you that when you go to your government and try to להשפיע, to influence your government regarding that, that the majority of Israelis, support you doing this, because there are people that say, how come Jews are telling their government how to act? But we are asking you to do this. Okay, so you are not alone as well. Okay, well, we're not alone when you support us. So we need you to influence your government to start making Israel stop the war, end occupation, and stop this reform, this illegal reform that is actually. There are a lot of other countries now. It's happening in Europe and in the States. Okay, but it doesn't mean that we have such a strong demonstrating movement that it's we're trying to stop it, and we need your help to stop it. And we're going to be there also when people attack you because of your Jewishness, because you defending left Israel and things like that. So I think that we're in the same we're in the same community, and we really have to strengthen our relations between the left community in Israel and in the diaspora.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And now we've reached the time for questions. So just the housekeeping rules is that we're going to be here until just before 4. So we have 20 minutes for questions. So 3:50. We're here for 15 minutes. And when you ask your question, say your name and make sure that it is a question. Questions end with question marks. They don't require introductions and comments, but we're happy to hear them. So we'll start with you.
I have 2 questions. My name is Joyce Siemens. I've been involved with NIF for many, many years, Sakui and other organizations. And I'm extremely worried. I have one question which you can answer simply, and that is, if you took the pulse of the Israeli society today, how many people would opt for a 2-state solution?
I don't know, but there are pollings regarding that. But I don't know. I think we have to ask Ron. Maybe he has the exact number. Yeah.
Oh, that's wrong.
Yeah. I do regretfully, I can say that in a sense, people are because of the 7th of October are less keen regarding, they're saying that, they're less keen regarding that. But on the other hand, we hear Gadi Moses that he was a hostage released several weeks ago, and he said, when there's peace, I will come and teach you regarding agriculture. And so what it means is that people are starting to understand that even if trust is very difficult at this time, there is no other solution.
And I can you might not all get to speak with Ron downstairs, but I've been lucky to hear from him 4 times in the last 4 days. And what he'll tell you is that if you ask Israelis today, do you believe in the creation of a Palestinian state? They'll say no. But if you say, do you believe in a regional comprehensive agreement that includes normalization with Saudi Arabia, that requires a binding path to a Palestinian state, they'll say yes. And the idea is that, and what Ron will tell you, is that the carrot of being the good guys and giving the Palestinians the state that they deserve and have the right to is not enough of a carrot for Israelis after October 7th. But the reward of normalization with Saudi Arabia and the moderate states, that is the reward for Israelis, and that is the reward that they're willing to pay the price of Palestinian statehood for. That's what Ron's research with Accord will tell you. And your second question
would be more to you than to Gaby, but just to give a sense to Gaby of what the situation is here. And you're with people who represent the left here, represent everything I think you believe in. But the ultimate question is, who can influence the Canadian government? And is it CIJA or is it those people in this room? And I have to say that CIJA, which is the larger Jewish organization, has significantly more power and access to government than our organizations. So I think that it's very important for us to understand and to look at who's in this room, because you're a young person and there's, but another young person, and all of us are at least, older than young, if I can put it politely. So the question is, even who are we in this room or in the room down below? And we have to think it's really important to understand that. Now, I had questions for everything you said, but I'm leaving it. Gaby, I really, really appreciate what you have to say and the work you're doing. And I would do anything to support you, but I just feel that we need action on the ground more than the demonstrations. I know many people who go to those demonstrations, and I know that they do not represent the largest sector of the community in Israel, and I'm afraid. Anyway, that's my speech.
So just briefly on the question about Canadian democracy, we are lucky, privileged, fortunate to live in a democracy where if you call your representatives, somebody in their office, and often they themselves will return your message within a few days or a few weeks. And there's an election going on in 50 days. That's another opportunity. Does CIJA have more influence than the Jewish left in this country? Yeah, they do. They're bigger than us. But when you asked Canadian Jews what they believe the message of the New Israel Fund much more than they believe the message of CIJA. There was an amazing poll that the NIF and JSpace sponsored this year that found that if you ask Canadian Jews if they have a connection to Israel, emotional, 90% of them say yes. And if you ask them if they're Zionists, only 50% of them say yes. And why is that the case? It's because the word Zionism has been co-opted by Ben-Gvir, by Smotrich, by the radical right, and by Jewish representative organizations in Canada that are more afraid of calling out what happens in the occupation than in putting any pressure on Israel's right wing. If you care about the occupation, which most Canadian Jews do, if you care about a two-state solution, which most Canadian Jews do, our communal organizations and our representative organizations to Parliament are not representing us so effectively. But the upside is that we have organizations that do represent us effectively, these organizations, and also CIJA and the UJA and CJPAC are composed of us. We are the Jews that they claim to represent, and when we express ourselves to those organizations, eventually the pressure will come to bear on them that they will recognize that they are on the wrong side of these issues as democratic representative bodies.
I think it's also an age issue because many of the youth in Canada, you accepted, are basically writing off Israel at this moment.
It's one of the issues. We'll go this way and then we'll look.
I'm stopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any way, it just seems like in this day and age, we need to kind of get together and instead of kind of a piecemeal, you know, do this and this and this, if we can be, especially now with our election coming up and what's going on in Israel and the States, to be more of a voice so that we can be, you know, like see the stars.
So what happened in America is that Amenu, which was the American branch of the labor Zionist movement, and Americans for Peace Now, which is the fundraising arm for Shalom Achshav, joined to become the New Jewish Narrative. And New Jewish Narrative and Meretz in America are running jointly as Hatikva. In Canada, the same. Amenu and Meretz are running jointly as Hatikva, and we are casting a wide net and asking for the support of all of the organizations, the ones hosting this event, Women Wage Peace, CFPN, everybody we can get on board. Whether or not the whole broad center and left of center in the Jewish community should unite under one leader, that's not my place to answer. You can take that up with Ben and Maytal downstairs. But before you do that, I live here. I have an email address that I'll respond to. Ask questions of Gaby. She's smarter than me and more important for you to hear from by a lot. Michael?
I actually do have a question for Gaby. So it's an information question, not specifically. Is it safe for Canadian Jews or critical of Israel to visit Israel specifically around what happens at the border and if the passport could be taken and being arrested? I'm thinking about since October 2nd, things we're hearing the changes to the laws that were just made around the border and being arrested if you support international prosecution. And also, which I'm not sure if you've heard this so much, a very huge increase in online doxing and harassment, specifically in Canada. And so, like, is it safe? What do you think is going to happen? And what would you do? Like, let's say you do go to the border and they do want to turn you away. What do you do next? Let's say you're in Israel and they do take your passport and arrest you. Like, what do you do?
Look, I'll tell you a story. Several years ago, I suddenly got a phone. Someone calls me. Hi, Gaby. I'm Peter Beinart. I'm in here in the border, and they're not letting me through. So, no, but which means it's not something new. Okay, it's happening. There's a lot. There are people that actually, which in the end, we were able to fix it, and he crossed and he came to Israel. But there are several people from the Jewish community, from the Arab community. It's sometimes it's very, very difficult, and they're not allowed in, and Palestinians are not allowed to fly through Ben Gurion. It's different. So it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but only in very difficult cases that will happen. For example, I had a case of students that were working with just the Partners for Just Peace and things like that, which were targeted and it was more difficult. And there are legal ways to fix that. It can happen, but if you just are in favor of any of the organizations that are funded by NIF or anything like that, that will not be a problem. But if yes, just take my number, and if you and then just if something happens, then there's some other organizations. Sometimes people call me before they get here. Not here. They get to Israel, so I can be prepared in the sense that maybe it's going to happen. It will be crazy if Israel starts closing its doors for left Jews. That will be really, really crazy. So it's important that even if it happens and then you can go in, it's important to let it out, to be known, because the pressure then will be stronger.
So we have one more question. One short question, lightning round.
Exactly. I don't know if it's short. You had said that it's crucial now that there is that your umbrella group has a plan, and in order to present it to the people that's, going forward, is there a plan? Like, is there a plan that you can articulate and share with us and with Israelis, or is it still in the project?
There are several things that are happening at the same time. First, I have to tell you that that for the first time we have a working groups regarding when we get to power again. Hopefully, what are the first things that we'll have to be doing? It's like some kind of in reverse engineering of all the anti-democratic moves this government has done, that we can shake them back again and other things. So this is for the first time, the left doesn't really know how to rule. And we have to be clear about it. But we learned. And so that's why this time we're going to be a lot more prepared regarding that. So that's we have. Secondly, the important thing is now the fact that they're trying to mess up with the election legislation. So we're very on top of it. Okay, it's not going to pass easily. And we're also working, we have teams that will be working in appeals to the Supreme Court if this happens, so they will not be able to change that in the city. Now, third, the opposition for the first time is trying to work together. We haven't been able to do that because I said Yair Golan is trying to bring the Arab parties into that, and some of the opposition members do not agree. But we're trying to bring them together in order to do that. Actually, they have planned for the first time to make an appeal to the Supreme Court together regarding the chief of the head of the Shin Bet. So all of them are going to the Supreme Court together, which is very important because it's an act of opposition that is doing something together, and so that's also important. And we're trying to make the movement not only of demonstrations, but to make some kind of civil disobedience the legal part of the civil disobedience, which will be hopefully there will be a shvita,
General strike.
a general strike, and things like that. So we're in the midst of catastrophe, and we're really starting to realize it, most Israelis, and well, I hope we will be able to stop the avalanche.
Esther. So everybody, please join me. We're all going to go downstairs now. The guest speakers, the heads of organizations hosting this conference will be milling around downstairs. You can ask them as many questions as you find reasonable. Try not to hog them. Let's share the wealth of knowledge. But really, Gaby, thank you for being here, for traveling.